All right, so are you ready to dive into a document that stirred up controversy for over 150 years?
Sure am.
The Communist Manifesto.
Mm-hmm.
You might think, oh, this is just some, historical relic.
Yeah.
But its analysis of capitalism, class struggle, it still resonates in our modern world, doesn't it?
It really does. And what I find so striking is how this document, written in 1848, right? Revolutions, upheaval everywhere, kicks off with that line, a specter is haunting Europe, the specter of communism.
Oh, I get chills just hearing it.
It just speaks to the anxieties of the time.
Yeah.
And it kind of foreshadows the enduring impact these ideas would have.
Oh, absolutely. It's such a powerful opening, just throws you right into the thick of things.
Yeah.
What I always found interesting is how the manifesto, it lays out its arguments with such direct language, particularly when it comes to defining the bourgeoisie and the proletariat.
Right. And it's not just about rich versus poor, is it?
No.
It dives much deeper, focusing on the very structure of economic power. Marx and Engels highlight the bourgeoisie as, the owners of the means of production, of factories, the land, the systems that actually create wealth. And this isn't static.
Right.
They really emphasize how this class has emerged throughout history, constantly revolutionizing production to amass more and more power.
And you have the flip side. You have the proletariat.
Yeah.
And what stood out to me is how their identity is defined by what they lack.
Exactly.
They own very little beyond their ability to labor, which they then must sell, right, to survive.
Right.
And that creates this inherent power imbalance.
Absolutely.
It's like baked right into the system.
Baked right into the system. And for Marx and Engels, this isn't just a contemporary problem of the 19th century, right?
Right.
They're arguing that this struggle between those who control the means of production and those who rely on selling their labor is the engine of all history.
It's like the overarching narrative, in a way. The manifesto really emphasizes this point, gives examples from, Roman patricians and plebeians, feudal lords, serfs. It's almost like you're saying this pattern repeats itself throughout history, just with different actors, different costumes on. Right.
And what makes the bourgeoisie different, they argue, is this constant need to revolutionize production.
Okay.
Think about the incredible technological advancements of the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
The rise of factories, the shift from rural to urban life. This was unprecedented, and it created massive social upheaval.
Yeah. Like they unleashed these forces they couldn't control.
Exactly. And the manifesto actually acknowledges the bourgeoisie's accomplishments.
Yeah.
It almost admires their transformative power at first.
Right, right.
But then it takes this sharp turn.
It does, yeah.
A big BT.
A big BT.
That changes everything.
That changes everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Because while they acknowledge the bourgeoisie's role in kind of driving progress, they also argue that this very progress sows the seeds of its own destruction. The inherent contradictions of capitalism, they argue, inevitably lead to crises.
So they're saying overproduction, economic crashes, all of that's built into how capitalism functions.
Exactly.
Not just unfortunate accidents.
Precisely. These crises, they argue, are not merely bumps in the road. They are unavoidable features of the capitalist system. And, we can't forget these crises, they hit the working class the hardest, right?
Yeah.
Bourgeoisie might see their profits dip, but the proletariat, they're the ones facing unemployment, poverty, bearing the brunt of that economic instability.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where I think the manifesto's warnings about the plight of the proletariat, their working conditions, their struggles, it all becomes especially relevant.
Yeah.
Because they don't sugarcoat it.
They don't.
The manifesto doesn't sugarcoat the hardships faced by the working class.
No.
They describe workers being reduced to appendages of the machine, like practically cogs in this wheel of industrial progress. And, reading those lines, it's hard not to think about how precarious work has become for many people, even today.
Absolutely.
Even if the machines look quite different. Right.
It's such a poignant observation, and they argue that this dehumanizing aspect of labor, it's not accidental. It is a direct result of how capitalism treats labor as a commodity.
Right.
And this, they claim, is ultimately what gives the proletariat its revolutionary potential. They are, as they famously say, the grave diggers of the bourgeoisie.
Wow.
And not out of some, innate desire for destruction, but as an inevitable consequence
right
of the system itself.
On the system itself. So enter the communists.
Right.
But they're not just another political party
Right.
looking to kind of tweak the system around the edges, right?
Exactly. And the manifesto makes a very clear distinction between communists and, other working class movements that might have existed at the time.
Yeah, yeah. So what are some of those key differences?
So one of the major differences is this emphasis on internationalism. So while, in the 19th century, nationalism is on the rise,
Right.
Marx and Engels, they see the proletariat struggle as a global one,
Okay.
transcending national borders.
Because a worker in Manchester has more in common with a worker in Paris than with, the factory owner in their own backyard.
Precisely.
It's a really powerful idea. And especially, I think, when you think about how interconnected our world is today, right?
Right. Oh, absolutely.
Through global supply chains, multinational corporations. It's more relevant than ever, I think.
And this international perspective, it ties into their other key difference, which is the scope of their vision, right?
Okay.
The manifesto, it's not about, incremental reforms.
Yeah.
It's not about slightly better working conditions. They are calling for complete societal transformation.
Wow.
A world where the means of production are no longer controlled by the few, but owned collectively.
Which brings us, I think, to the part that tends to make people,
Yeah,
raise an eyebrow or two.
for sure.
The manifesto stance on private property.
Yeah.
Pretty radical, right?
It's important to remember what Marx and Engels actually meant
Yeah, could be.
by private property. They weren't
Yeah.
talking about your personal belongings, right?
Right.
Or even, small-scale ownership. Their target was what they called bourgeois property.
Okay.
This kind of ownership that creates vast inequalities
Right.
and gives one class power over another's livelihood.
So when they call for the abolition of private property,
Right.
they're talking about the factories, the land, the banks, like the very things
The
that,
means of production.
yeah, the means of production
Yeah.
that generate the wealth, that maintain this power imbalance.
Precisely.
Okay.
They argued that by restructuring ownership and control over these means of production,
Right.
society could move toward a more equitable distribution
Okay.
of wealth, of resources.
Now, whether or not that's achievable
Right, exactly.
or even desirable,
A whole other discussion.
whole other discussion.
Yeah.
But it's a perspective that I think challenges us to think critically
Yes,
about how economic systems concentrate power.
it does.
And speaking of challenging assumptions,
Yeah.
there's another area where the manifesto tends to spark debate, even among those who
Oh, yeah.
find its economic critique compelling.
Yeah.
Family.
Yes.
And the language they use
It's true.
to describe the bourgeois family.
It can be pretty jarring, can it?
It can be pretty jarring, even today.
The manifesto does not hold back.
No.
Even stating that the bourgeois sees in his wife a mere instrument of production.
Wow. Yeah, that'll raise some eyebrows.
And it's important to remember,
Right.
they're writing in a specific historical context.
Oh.
And their aim was to expose how social institutions, even the family, were being shaped by the dominant economic forces of the time.
So they weren't necessarily against love or family as concepts,
No, I don't think so.
but rather how capitalism could warp and exploit these relationships
Exactly.
for its own ends.
They argued that in a system driven by, private property,
Right.
pursuit of profit,
Right.
even intimate relationships could be reduced to economic arrangement.
Makes you wonder how much of that thinking, even if unconsciously,
Right.
still influences our ideas about family structures,
Absolutely.
gender roles today. Yeah.
A question worth pondering. And that's what's so fascinating about the manifesto.
Yeah.
It's not just this historical document, is it?
Yeah.
It is a lens through which we can examine our own world, our own assumptions about how society functions, how power operates, even in the most personal aspects of our lives.
That's true. It's like we opened up this intellectual time capsule, and it's still got this power to spark debate, challenge our assumptions.
It's really
Even about things we might just take for granted in our everyday lives, right?
It's a testament to the power of ideas, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
But it's also important to remember the manifesto wasn't meant to be some,
Right.
static blueprint.
How-to guide.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Marx and Engels, they saw it as a call to action,
Okay.
a spark, right, to ignite revolutionary change.
And if you read the manifesto,
Yeah.
it doesn't read like this detailed instruction manual, right?
No.
For a communist utopia,
Yeah.
it's actually surprisingly short. And frankly, like, light on specifics, right?
And that's because they were more interested in analyzing the problems of capitalism
Right.
and kind of outlining these general principles that they believe should guide societal transformation.
Okay, so they're laying out the problems and they're laying out kind of the principles
The principles.
to get us to that next step, but they're leaving it open-ended in a way.
Right, because they believed that the specifics
Yeah.
of how to actually build a communist society, those would emerge from the struggle itself,
Okay.
shaped by the historical and material conditions of that time.
So it's not about, like, imposing some preset vision on the future.
And that's part of, I think, why it's so often misinterpreted,
It is.
both by, its critics and even its proponents.
Because the critics will treat it like it's, Stalin's Russia.
Exactly, like it's a literal recipe
Yeah.
for some sort of totalitarian regime.
Right.
Right, and then you have, on the other hand, you have supporters
Yeah.
who turn it into dogma. Right.
Right. They take it too literally.
Ignoring its emphasis on analysis and adaptation, right?
Yeah.
Thinking about, okay, how do we actually apply these ideas
Right.
to our own time and place?
It's a living document in a way, right?
Precisely, yeah. It speaks to the enduring power of this text, I think.
Yeah.
How it continues to be, both revered and reviled, right?
Yeah.
But I think beyond the debates about its legacy, the real value of engaging with the manifesto
Yeah.
is the questions it forces us to confront.
Questions about power, inequality.
About economic power, yeah.
Social inequality, the nature of work.
And those haven't disappeared.
I mean, none of these issues have
Yeah.
magically vanished.
In our globalized, tech-driven world,
Exactly.
if anything,
They're amplified, aren't they?
they're amplified.
Yeah.
Think about the rise of automation,
Yeah, the gig economy.
economy, yeah, the widening gap between,
The haves and the have-not.
haves and have-nots. Yeah. I mean, these are all issues that they resonate with the core concerns of the manifesto.
They do.
Even if the context has, obviously shifted.
It's evolved, yeah.
Yeah.
But the core issues are still there.
They're still there. So even if we, might disagree with Marx and Engels' proposed solutions.
Right. Even if we see the flaws in how, communist ideas have been implemented historically,
Sure.
there's still so much
Absolutely.
we can learn
A lot to learn.
from their analysis. And frankly, like, their willingness to even challenge the status quo.
Absolutely. To not take things for granted, right?
Right.
To not just accept, well, this is the way it is, but to say, why?
Yeah.
Could it be different?
Could it be different?
What role do we play in shaping that future?
That's what I take away from this.
Absolutely.
Like, it's a call to engage with the world critically,
Yes.
question our assumptions.
Don't even imagine.
Right.
Alternative possibilities.
Yeah.
Even if they seem radical.
Even if they seem impossible.
Even impossible, right.
Yeah.
And that's
me.
what a legacy for a document that's over 150 years old.
That's a pretty good legacy.
It really is.
So I think for me, I mean, we've just scratched the surface, obviously,
Oh, absolutely.
in this deep dive.
This is just the beginning, right?
Yeah, and I hope our listeners are inspired to,
To pick it up.
pick it up.
To read it.
Give it a read.
Wrestle with it.
It's surprisingly, like I said, it's short.
It's short. It's accessible.
It's accessible.
You don't need a PhD.
You don't need a PhD in Marxist theory.
No, to understand it. And I find that, the most important conversations often that the manifesto sparks are the ones that we have with ourselves.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a really good point.
So,
yeah, keep those conversations.
yeah, keep questioning.
Keep questioning.
Keep learning.
Keep learning.
And most importantly, keep diving deep.
Keep diving deep. I love it.